I drive at night for a living, and I've been doing it long enough that the dark stopped feeling like night and started feeling like a place, not a time. A place I go to and come back from. I'm a medical courier. Lab samples mostly, sometimes a small sealed cooler that has to be at a hospital across the state before a surgeon scrubs in at 6. It is, on paper, the most boring job in the world. You and a dashboard and 300 miles of reflective paint. But here's what nobody tells you when you start. The road itself is the safe part. The long, empty stretches don't want anything from you. The danger lives in the in-between places. The rest stops. The all-night pumps. The motels off the ramp. The places built for people to pause in and never stay. They're lit. They're signposted. They look like safety. And that's exactly the trick of them. Because at 3 in the morning, a lit building with nobody in it is a more frightening thing than any dark road. And it took me years and 3 bad nights to understand why. I'm going to tell you those 3. None of them ended the way the worst version could have ended. And that's most of the reason I can sit here and talk about them at all. But not one of them is closed either. I never got the answer to any of them. What I got instead was a set of habits I now do every single night without choosing to. And by the end, I think you'll understand exactly where each one came from. The first one was at a state rest area. You know, the kind restrooms, a couple of vending machines, picnic tables nobody uses after dark. All of it under those tall amber lights that drain the color out of everything and turn every face the same gray. It was a little after 2 in the morning. The only reason I stopped at all was too much coffee. And I want to be honest, because if I hadn't needed that bathroom, I'd have driven straight past, and none of this would have happened. And some part of me has never decided whether that would have been better or worse. There were maybe 4 other vehicles in the lot. 2 semis idling down at the far end where the truckers sleep. A minivan with its curtains drawn. And 1 sedan parked up close to the building, nose pointed out at the lot. I noticed it only because of that everybody noses in at a rest stop. You back into a spot when you're planning to leave in a hurry. I filed it away the way you file 100 small things a night and don't think about again. Or don't think you do. The women's room was empty when I went in. All concrete and fluorescent buzz and that hard tile echo where you can hear your own zipper from across the room. I took the stall at the far end, because that's what you do. And while I was in there, the outer door opened. Footsteps came in. They passed the first stalls, which is normal. People want distance, same as me. But then they stopped. 2 doors down. And after that, nothing happened. No stall door swinging, no latch, no paper, no flush. None of the small sounds a person makes when they're actually using a bathroom. Just someone standing, 2 down from me, being quiet. I told myself she was on her phone. People hide in bathroom stalls to take a call, to cry, to sit somewhere with a door for a minute. I've done it myself. So I waited. And the longer I waited, the more clearly I could hear that I wasn't hearing anything. No breath, no rustle of a coat, no glow tap of a screen. I was listening to a person work to make no sound at all. So I did the thing you can't help doing. I bent down a little, just to catch the feet under the partition, and there were shoes there, 2 stalls down, but they weren't pointed at the toilet. They were pointed out, toward the gap, toward me, just standing, toes square to my door, in a closed stall, in an empty bathroom at 2 in the morning. I went very still. I got my keys out and laced them through my fingers, a thing I'd read about 100 times, and felt stupid practicing, and never once thought I'd actually do. And then I made myself wait, because the worst move was to bolt out blind into a concrete room with one exit. I listened past the bathroom, out to the lot, and I waited until I heard one of those semis throttle up to pull out noise, movement, a witness in motion. And on that sound, I came out of my stall fast, and I didn't go to the sink, and I didn't go to my car. I went straight out the door toward the truck, lifting my hand like I knew the driver, like he was waiting for me. I'd never seen him before. He slowed anyway. That was enough. I got in my car, locked it, and pulled out hard. And it's what happened next that I still can't put down. The sedan that had been nosed out toward the lot pulled out right behind me. Not aggressively, it just left when I left. I got on the interstate, and it got on behind me, 2 cars back, matching my speed. And it stayed there. Through one exit. Through 2. I sped up. It stayed. I dropped to almost nothing in the right lane to force it past. It dropped too and hung back. For about 9 miles it was just headlights in my mirror that wouldn't grow and wouldn't fall away, holding the exact distance of someone who didn't want to catch me, only to see where I went. I got off at a busy exit with a 24-hour diner and pulled right up to the lit window where 2 waitresses were standing, and I sat there with my engine running and my eyes on the mirror. The car came down the ramp behind me. It slowed at the bottom, and then it went on past, back up onto the highway, and the taillights were gone before I could read a single number off the plate. I never saw a face. Not in the stall, not in the car. I only know that whoever it was had parked to leave fast, had gone into a bathroom and used nothing, had stood facing a stranger's door in the dark, and then had followed that stranger 9 miles down a highway just to learn which exit she trusted enough to stop at. I don't like that they learned it. I don't stop at rest areas at night anymore unless there's a staffed building with a person behind a counter. And in any public restroom anywhere, the first thing I do now before I pick a stall is read the shoes under every door. It takes 1 second. I have never once skipped it since that night, and I never will. The second one almost got me, and it nearly got me precisely because it came dressed as the most ordinary thing in the world. Somebody needing help. It was a 24-hour fuel station off a rural exit, one of those places that's bright as surgery inside and pure black 10 feet past the last pump. My tank was near empty, and it was the only fuel for 40 miles in either direction, so I had no real choice. And that matters, because if I'd had a choice, I'd have rolled right by. I pulled up to a pump. There was one other car off to the side with its hood up, and a man and a woman standing near it, looking exactly as tired and put out as you'd look if your car had died at a gas station at 1 in the morning. Nothing about them set off an alarm. That was the problem. The man came over while I was fueling, polite, apologetic, hands where I could see them, which I noticed and which, in hindsight, was a little too considerate. People who actually need help don't usually think to manage your fear first. He said their alternator had gone. The car wouldn't turn over. They'd been stuck more than an hour. Both their phones were dead. And could I maybe run them up to the next town, just 15 minutes up the road? And every single piece of that is something that happens to real, ordinary, unlucky people. I've been stranded myself. I know that specific helplessness. I wanted to be the person who helps. But night driving teaches you timing, the order things are supposed to happen in, and his story had a piece in the wrong order. He told me both their phones were dead unlucky, but possible. Except while he was standing there saying it, the woman back by the car was looking down at something cupped in her hands, and the something was glowing. A screen, lit, throwing light up under her chin. I caught it for less than a second, and when I looked again, she'd lowered her hands and the light was gone, and she'd done it smoothly. The way you lower something you don't want seen rather than the way you put away a dead phone. I didn't say a word about it. That's the part I'm almost proud of, because the wrong move, the move that turns a quiet lot into something worse, is to accuse, to make it a confrontation where you're outnumbered 2-1 with the dark at your back. So instead, I got boring, bureaucratic. I told him I was so sorry, but I genuinely couldn't take passengers. It was a hard company rule. The vehicle was GPS monitored and logged. I'd be fired on the spot, none of which was quite true, but all of which turned me from a kind woman alone into a useless, complicated target who'd leave a record. I said I'd phone a tow service for them the second I had signal, and asked if I could get their plate number for the dispatcher. And that's where the politeness thinned out. He didn't want to give me the plate. A truly stranded man hands you the plate gratefully. This one got just slightly harder around the eyes about a plate number, and that told me everything I was ever going to know. I topped off, got in, thumbed every lock, and pulled out. In the mirror, the woman was already walking back toward the lit station, as if the whole thing had been switched off, and the car's hood was still propped up over an engine neither of them had any intention of touching. The breakdown was the set, the story was the bait, and the kindness was supposed to be mine. The part that I can't shake came weeks later, when I mentioned it to another courier who runs a route that overlaps mine. He went quiet, and then he described the same exit, the same couple, the same dead car, the same dead phones, the same 15-minute ride to the same town, a different month, almost word for word. We sat there comparing it like two people slowly realizing we'd both been shown the identical card trick by the identical magician, and both very nearly fallen for it. I don't know what waited at the end of that 15-minute ride. I've decided on purpose that I don't need to know. What I know is that it was rehearsed, it was patient, and I was just one stop on a route they'd been running long before me and kept running long after. So now I never get out of my car near anyone stranded at a stop at night. If someone genuinely needs help, I help the only way that costs me nothing. I call it in for them. From behind locked glass, with the engine running, and then I drive on. It is a cold way to move through the world. I made my peace with cold a long time ago, on a route I no longer take. The third one is the one that follows me into every motel I've stayed in since, which is why I avoid them now whenever my body will let me. My route shifted for a stretch, and dropped a mandatory rest break right in the middle of a leg, which put me in a budget motel off the interstate single level, every door opening straight onto the parking lot. They gave me 112, ground floor, door to the lot, which is the worst pairing there is, and I asked to be moved up. The clerk said they were full. The lot had 6 cars in it. But I'd been awake 19 hours, and my judgment was sanded down to nothing, so I took the key and told myself I was being paranoid. The room wasn't frightening. I want that to land, because it's the whole point. It was just a tired room, clean enough, smelling of old cigarette smoke under newer air freshener. The wrong things were small, and small enough that each one had a reasonable answer, and it was only later, stacked together, that they stopped being reasonable. The chain lock was mounted on the door, but the little slotted track it slides into had been unscrewed and put back at a slightly off angle, so the chain wouldn't actually seat. It would rest in place and look locked and hold nothing. I only found that because I test everything now. The deadbolt worked, so I threw it and wedged the desk chair under the handle and felt theatrical doing it. The second wrong thing was in the bathroom. The little paper band they drape across the toilet to swear it's been cleaned was there, untorn. but the towels on the rack were damp. Only faintly, but unmistakably. A freshly cleaned room with a sealed toilet should have dry towels, and I told myself the laundry just hadn't finished drying, because cheap places rush the wash. And that's true. And I almost believed it. The third thing I couldn't explain, then or now. I'd set my cooler and my bag on the second bed by the window, and I'd left the curtains open a 2-inch gap on purpose, so I could see my car from where I lay. I don't sleep deep on the road, never have. It's half the reason I'm still doing this job. And sometime after I drifted off, I came awake because the light in the room had changed. The gap in the curtain was gone, closed, not blown shut. The AC was off because it rattled, and there wasn't a breath of air moving. Something had drawn that curtain while I slept, and I lay there in the dark doing the math on which side of the glass you'd have to be standing on to do it, and not liking either answer. I didn't scream. I didn't call the desk. I think some part of me had already understood I'd never learn enough to prove a single thing, and the only useful move left was to be gone. So I packed in the dark, quiet as I could, my eyes never leaving that door, and I checked out at 3:45. A different clerk was on now. When I asked, light as I could make it, whether anybody had access to the room's overnight maintenance, cleaning, anyone, he didn't look up from his screen. He just said, "Only us," and let it sit there. And here's the detail that rearranged the entire night. Except I didn't get it until a week later. On the way in, I'd snapped one photo of the room. Just one, because the broken chain lock annoyed me, and I wanted it for a bad review. I'd forgotten about it. When it surfaced in my camera roll in daylight, calm, coffee in hand, I noticed the thing I'd walked right past at 1 a.m, the connecting door. The kind some motel rooms have between them, that's meant to stay locked, that I hadn't even registered was in the room. In the photo, it was open, not wide a hand's width, a dark vertical seam, but open, and open from the very first second, before I'd touched anything, before I'd thrown the deadbolt and wedged the chair under the handle on the only door I thought mattered. I had spent the whole night barricading the wrong door, and the right one had been standing open the entire time, on a room I never saw. I don't know who was on the other side of it. Maybe no one. Maybe it had hung open for weeks and meant nothing. But put the 3 things in a row, towels still damp from someone, a curtain drawn shut while I slept, a connecting door open before I ever walked in, and they make a shape. And the shape is not one I want to finish drawing. So now I won't take a ground floor motel room at all. I check the connecting door before I check anything else. And if it doesn't lock solid from my side, I hand the key back and eat the cost. I photograph every room the second the door opens, before I set anything down. And when a clerk tells me they're full while the lot sits half empty, I don't argue and I don't stay. I get back on the road and drive to the next town, even when the next town is an hour of black highway away, because an hour of black highway is something I understand all the way to the bottom. A locked room that doesn't actually lock is not. People always assume the scary part of driving all night is the road, the empty hours, the deer coming out of the tree line, the fight to keep your eyes open at 4 a.m. Those are real, and they've nearly had me more than once. But the road never frightened me the way the stops did. The road is only distance, and distance doesn't want anything. The stops are where the other people are, the small number of them who are out at that hour for a reason that isn't a job or a bladder or an empty tank. I can't tell you what any of those 3 people actually wanted from me. I got lucky, or I got careful, or some mix of the two. And the worst part is, I'll never know which one saved me, which means I'll never know how close it really was. What I can tell you is the set of small, automatic things I do now, every night, without ever deciding to. I back into the spot so I can leave facing out. I read the shoes under every bathroom door before I choose one. I help stranded strangers only through locked glass and a phone call, and then I drive. I check the door behind the door. None of it is brave and none of it is dramatic. It's just the residue of 3 nights that could have gone the other way, and the quiet, permanent certainty, every time I roll off an exit under those gray amber lights, that the place was never anywhere near as empty as it was pretending to be.